Hey, George, welcome to Late Night in the Midlands, my friend. We are live. How are you?
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm wonderful. How are you, Mike?
I am doing fine. I'm sorry if I caught you by surprise there for a minute. I know the number doesn't always come up normal, so but welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you back. It's been a while. Love the song too, by the way. I think I told you this last time. I use it often as a bumper music. I love it.
Oh, cool. The Alien Love Song.
Yes. Yeah, very good. It's got that old style to it, and I like it.
Yeah.
So,
Sweet.
yeah, so I guess let's start out there. What gave you the idea?
What gave me the idea? First, I'm going to say hello to our new listeners. Howdy. I know there's some new people listening in live, and others new will be coming up. And I'm glad you started with the music because most people know me from music, or at least some of the new people are. And what got me on Alien Love? I made love to an alien last night. I was beginning to tour. This was around '94. I was actually touring about half time at that point out of Nashville with my show, which back then I called it McClure's America. And but I had a part-time job, Mike. I had a part-time job. Believe it or not, I was a security guard. I was a security officer, and I liked that kind of job because nobody tells you what to think, and all you have to do is wear a uniform. I could bring my guitar banjo in, and you walk around every hour or something like that, and then your time's your own.
Yeah.
And so I did exactly that. I brought my banjo in, and I'd sit and pick on it or whatever. And they have to have a television in this place, and there was a 1-hour pseudo-documentary on alien abductions in the United States. And it said in the course of that, Mike, it said that 1 out of 4 Americans has either been molested by space aliens or abducted by space aliens. Huh. And I thought that was the funniest thing I ever heard. And so I wrote Alien Love right then. I actually wrote it on the banjo.
Yeah.
But so I wrote it right then, and before I went home that night, it was done. The song was finished. So that's how it came about.
So then every time I play that song, I probably have no idea how many people it means even more to.
Oh, who knows what it means. I had the only minor kind of hit I had was with that song. As a matter of fact, when the internet revolution, the digital revolution started with MP3, there's a company over in Japan that wanted my song. They wanted Alien Love. And they agreed to pay me so many, what percentage per download. And that was when MP3 was just brand new. And it ended up, I never got a penny out of these guys. It was Big Fish Japan, but I never got a penny out of them. But they emailed me. I had to email them like 8 times to get an answer. And then they emailed me back and they said, 10,000 people, 10,000 Japanese have downloaded your song. You're a big hit in Japan. And of course, 10,000 downloads is nothing now for a big hit online. It'd be like 1 million downloads in a day. But that was at the dawn of MP3 and internet, and 10,000 was a big figure. And so I had the satisfaction, the querulous satisfaction of having a minor hit somewhere, but of course no money came through with it, but it was but yeah, so who knows what it means to people. Japanese, they were downloading it, they were hitting it. So
well, maybe they made love to a lot of aliens, so you never know.
Yeah. Exactly. So in the last verse of that song, they had had a child, and she went back to the stars. His alien partner went back to the stars and left him on Earth raising this half-breed alien named Allie for alien, you know.
No.
So that was the last verse of the song.
That's fantastic, you know. And in a time when people are talking a lot about star children, and I'm hearing a lot about these black-eyed children too, but not hearing enough that I know enough about them. But, you know, just the thought of that is maybe there are some, you know, lovings going on with aliens, and, you know, this whole hybrid thing might actually have some meaning to it.
Oh, yeah, and of course the genetic, but a lot of people, and this is some of the spiritual things, you know, the Mayan calendar, Aztecan calendar things that I could talk about tonight. It's there are all these energies hitting Earth now. The Earth is, astronomically speaking, physically speaking, Earth in our solar system is in a unique position that it only enters every several thousand years. And where the energy from the center of the Milky Way galaxy actually is striking the sun and therefore, you know, coming on into the planets. And there are people who say that these energies striking us now are actually changing our DNA, because DNA is photoreactive. It reacts to sunlight. And I haven't researched this in detail, but I've read some what I think are pretty sound sources who are saying that the energy coming in the sunlight now may actually be changing our DNA. And it's very possible. Because most people say about this ascension of consciousness thing, about this development of mankind, humanity, most people say that it's a vibrational thing while we're in a new vibrational consciousness now, the age of Aquarius. And that was that song, I'm old enough, I'm of the generation to remember the song, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
Age of Aquarius. I changed the key. But the age of Aquarius was a huge hit. It went on for months and months. It seemed like for a year or 2 years it was a hit. And we're actually in the age of Aquarius now. And the Mayan people would say we're in the ninth wave of consciousness now, or the ninth world. The Hopi might say that we're in the fifth world. We have entered the fifth world now. It's a vibrational thing, wavelength type thing. Mm-hmm. And then we get into those conversations like those people who are trapped in a three-dimensional framework of reality, or 4D framework of reality, are not going to be able to vibrate with the new energy that's hitting us now, the new vibrations and the new waves. They won't be able to work with it, and so they're being left behind. So there are a lot of these kind of things going on, and it sort of is like the Alien Love song, which 1994 is when I wrote it. It was sort of 20 years ahead of its time, in a way, which is not unusual. In my career in music, I found that I tend to be way ahead of the curve, you know. And a lot of other people in Nashville have been watching my music career intently, including major labels, watched me closely, and they wanted to always know. Mike, when I started flying out, this was about 2006, I started flying to Arizona. First I drove a lot. I got tired of driving, so I started flying into Phoenix and then go on down, and I crossed the border into Mexico. I was doing this 2-3 times a year, just a total escape, total vacation for a week or so, and then come back. And these people were watching me so intently, major label people, that they'd send people down to the airport to try to pick my brain about where I'm going, because they thought I was going on business trips. You know, they thought I was cooking some new music business deal in Arizona. They wanted in on it. They wanted to find out what I was doing and then scoop me, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing, that a phenomenon of my life. But Yeah. So
Yeah, that's I love the song. I think that and again I joke around, but I think that for some it might have meaning. I've had people
oh
guests
yeah.
on this show who have told me they've been. One woman said that she was impregnated and then the baby was removed at some point, and so there's a lot that goes on off the earth, I guess. So you talk about living in harmony and how the I guess what you're saying here is that the Mayan calendar actually that's what it was talking about, right? Not the end of the world, but rather a new breed of consciousness.
Exactly. The Mayan calendars. Now there were more than one, and the Hob calendar, Haab, Hob calendar, was like our calendar, or Western civilization's calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar. And the Hob calendar measured one thing and one thing only, the revolution of the Earth around the sun, 365 and a quarter days. And that's like the Gregorian calendar. It only measures one thing, going around the sun. And we're going to come back to this in a second and see that it does a horribly poor job of doing that, and we'll talk about why. But then another calendar in the Mayan had, and by the way, the Maya people grew into the Aztec. The Toltec and Olmec preceded them, so it's a civilization that ran 4,000 to 6,000 years in Mesoamerica and Middle America. And when Cortez came across that, so of course he marched into what's now Mexico City. In Mexico, he was absolutely dumbfounded. He came in with 20 horses and 200 men and a bunch of Catholic priests. And what they found was floating gardens, 1 million people, city of 1 million population. It was the hugest city and civilization on Earth, most advanced one on Earth. So they had floating gardens, huge libraries, which Cortez burned, and so on.
Right.
So there was the long count is the next calendar we'll talk about. The long count in Mayans, it just started and went day by day forever. That's the long count, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 10 million and keep going.
Whew.
That's the long count.
That is long.
And then there's the Tzolkin calendar, the Tzolkin, the Tzolkin calendar. And this is the daily spiritual calendar that all Mayan people and Aztecan people and so on used. And by the way, there's still 6 million people in the Yucatan and Mexico who speak Mayan every day. That's their language, 6 million people. So this is a living culture.
So when they say that, when they say, George, well, we don't know what happened to the Mayan people, then basically they're ignoring the fact that the Mayan people are still here.
Yes, it's just one more lie perpetrated by Western science and Western civilization. There's just so many of them, and I'm glad that's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. If you read accounts or listen to accounts of Cortez coming into Mexico, into the Aztec civilization, they say the Spaniards encountered the Aztec people pulling living hearts out of virgins and sacrificing virgins and all this stuff. 100% lies. It's 100% untrue. The real truth is that they came in to the Americas. There were 110 million American Indians, Native Americans living in North and Central and South America. 110 million. And 70 million, it's estimated, were killed by syphilis and smallpox, by European diseases against which they had no protection. They had no resistance. But then the other 40 million people, they...
Uh-oh. They may have clipped them. Let's see here. Yeah, I think so. Hold on, what am I seeing here? I'm seeing... No. Almost looks like... Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah. How was... Skype asked how the call was. Well, I don't think they really want to know. It was going really well, as a matter of fact. But, yeah, we lost them. So let's bring them back on, because we're not going to cut to a break yet. So let's go ahead and get George back on with us. And let him pick right back up where he left off. All right, we'll get him. He might have been moving around, hit a dead zone maybe. George?
What happened?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, what happened?
I'm not sure. I thought maybe you moved and hit a dead zone or something, but you sound good tonight.
How far did it go through? I don't think I hit a dead zone. I rarely get them. It's possible.
Okay.
How far did I get before it cut out?
Well, you were talking about you had told us about the long count, and then you started getting into I guess they say that the people are no longer here, but they are. And at that point, it clicked out. So,
okay, you had asked me a question. Well, anyway, so we'll pick it up there.
Okay.
So the long count, and then the Tzolkin, Tzolkin, the Tzolkin calendar is the daily spiritual calendar describing the energies of the day, the energies that come in and hit Mother Earth from other places. And these energies all have a fundamental effect on we humans and everything living on Earth. So the Tzolkin calendar is the one that most people talk about when they're talking about the Mayan calendar. And it's a calendar that has a cycle of 260 days. It doesn't have a cycle of going around like the Earth around the sun, 365 days. Mm-hmm. It has a cycle of 260 days. And 260 days just happens to be the length of time it takes Venus to revolve around the sun. And it just happens to be the length of time of a woman's gestation. So human beings, the woman's in gestation for 260 days. So this 260 is a kind of a magic number.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're fine. That is a magic number. So, real quickly, just so people can understand, now you actually you are a scientist. So
right? I'm a highly trained scientist. Right. I'm a highly trained musician and writer, and I'm also a showman. I'm a performer.
Great, because I want to ask you a little bit about Pluto later, too. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the pictures. I just wanted to make sure. But, yeah, so yeah, okay, so the cycles, they have some similarities.
Yes, it has the Tzolkin 260-day cycle has similarities with other events. So the calendar is recording much more than the Earth's trip around the sun. So let's talk just a little bit about the Gregorian calendar, the one that Western civilization uses, Western science, Western civilization uses the Gregorian calendar from Pope Gregory. What it marks is only the one thing, the Earth's revolution around the sun. But there's something we need to point out right away, sort of smack you in the face kind of thing. It has 12 months. And a month, like a menses, a month is tied to the lunar cycle, to the moon. Mm-hmm. The lunar cycle is 28 days. And if you divide 365 by 28, what a real month is a lunar moon cycle. There are 13 of them. So if you multiply 13 times 28, 28 days in the lunar cycle, it comes out to exactly 364 days. It's the length of our year plus 1 day. So if we were really running a calendar that marked months, we'd be using 13 months plus 1 extra day. But the Gregorian calendar uses 12 months of 30 or 31 days each, and then they do the homogrification, which is a word I use, in February, 28 days, 27. That's to make up for that quarter day. Mm-hmm. But essentially it uses 30 or 31 days for each month, when really the lunar month is 28 days. So it has nothing to do with our nature, our natural existence. In other words, if you go out and watch the moon, which I do, it has no correlation with the Gregorian calendar whatsoever. And there's a reason for that. Let's look a little further into the calendar. So it's got the Gregorian calendar has 12 months, January, February, and so on. By the time you get to September, let's look at that. Septiembre, Spanish, sept, Latin. Sept means 7. Yet it's the 9th month. Right? You've got August, and then you've got Septiembre, September, 9th month, but it's named 7 by this guy Gregor, Pope Gregor. And then you go to October, Octubre, OCT, octal, 8. So it's named the 8th month, but we all know October is the 10th month in the Gregorian calendar. Similarly for November, Noviembre. Nov means 9, but it's the 11th month. And then December, Diciembre, decimal, means 10, but it's the 12th month. So it's almost like they intentionally monkey wrenched it, threw monkey wrenches into it to screw it up. And then I'm going to point out one other thing. In the spring and in the fall, in most of the United States and Europe, not Arizona, but most of the states in the United States force you to do something where they change the clock hours by an hour.
Oh, and I hate that too. It really annoys the hell out of me. It does.
Well, you come stay over here with me for a while. I don't ever change my clocks on anything. They all stay the same all year round. And in Arizona, they also do that. They don't ever change the clock. But there's something that's very, very sneaky and horrible that happens, especially in spring and fall. Our bodies are adjusting to the longer days in spring, the longer days, the stronger sunlight. It's getting warmer out. Things are getting green. The birds are chirping. And then all of a sudden, bam, they change the clock by an hour, and it throws your entire cycle and circuits off, and that's called your circadian rhythms that are tied to the natural world. They're tied to the moon, they're tied to the length of the day, and then the same thing in the fall. That's why I think you hate it so much, is because it breaks you from your natural rhythms of connecting with Earth. And so when you look back at the Gregorian calendar, you might begin to suspect that the whole thing's designed to break people, separate them from the natural rhythm cycles of the Earth and the Moon and the stars. They don't even follow the moon cycle correctly. But if we used a calendar of 13 months, we'd always be in sync with the moon.
Oh.
And now a fact that I learned a long time ago, and I don't want to tread into a tender a politically charged subject or anything, but women, I was told a long time ago by a woman, I was told that before lights were invented, all the women on Earth menstruated at the same time because they synchronized with the moon. That's what it's all about. Menses, moon, months. That's what it's all about. And so there's significant, what I would say, evidence that this Western civilization a long time ago engineered these things to intentionally separate people from our natural connection to things.
Yeah, well, and it does. It works. It does disconnect us. But go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that's fine. It definitely does, and that's why I don't ever change my clocks.
Well, just the computer is the only one that gets changed for me and my alarm clock, unfortunately. But the car clock and stuff, I never bothered to change those. But it's nice when you gain an hour, but when you lose an hour, it's really annoying. But I just wish they'd leave it alone. I mean, why change it? It's like you said. It's just throwing us off, and it does. But
I believe so, and I was just delighted to find that Arizona doesn't ever change the time, and so that to me that was a beautiful thing. Now Indianapolis, I learned when I toured, and it's a darn good thing I was using a local fiddler up there on some shows because we had a show in Indianapolis. And he said, well, it's an hour different. They don't ever change their time. And I would have been an hour late for the show. but he was a local boy, so he knew that. But Indianapolis also never used to change their time. But then they came down on them, and this was just in the last 2 or 3 years, and they forced them. The state literally forced Indianapolis to start changing their time in spring and fall. The people hated it. They really objected to it. The state is becoming so powerful,
I see. Hey, George, can you hang on for a moment? We've got to take a quick break here, so I want to put you on hold for a moment, and then we're going to bring you back right after the break. So hang on with us for just a moment. Folks, in Louisiana, 2 dead, 8 injured, and the gunman has, I believe, turned the gun on himself, so he's gone.
Where?
This was in Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana. Yeah, so
terrible.
Yeah, it is.
Well, Mike, I think what we're seeing is the takedown of United States of America, and in fact, I have written research briefs and my Truth News articles that go out via email on this topic, describing how Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iraq, Libya, Syria were all taken down. And if you look at the way the techniques, they're employing exactly the same thing in the United States. It's identical. And of course, we had one of these horrible shooting events in Chattanooga, which is getting pretty close to home for us in Nashville, just a few weeks ago, and I told one of my good friends, I said, we're just going to see an ongoing escalation. They're going to continue this until they get everybody so terrified they're going to try to steal the guns from us.
Yeah, and that's right. That's what this is. That's why this is happening. And and here we go. I'm going to go off the deep end here for some of these Fox News watchers. But the fact is that the CIA has assets who do go in and do things like this. And I know you hate to have to believe something like that, but it's true.
Oh, it's absolutely true. In fact, I'm of the generation that remembers Vietnam talk when I was little. I was a boy, but I'm of the generation who can remember that. And it was revealed. I still remember the shock when it was revealed that the CIA was literally running heroin in and out of Vietnam and illegal weapons. And then, of course, they were bringing bodies back, marijuana and heroin back in caskets that were supposedly filled, had dead soldiers in them. And horrible stuff was going on way back then, and then I think it's substantiated, well documented that the CIA literally funded IS and ISS and created them and created Al Qaeda. So there's this, it's sort of a horrible joke that people call it Al-Qaeda, the CIA, Al Qaeda, but with CIA and inserted for the QU, because the CIA literally trained Al Qaeda, and then the same for ISIS, IS, and all this. And it's their mechanism. It's David Rockefeller's mechanism, and he just reports to Jacob Rothschild. That's the head of the viper. That's the head of the snake. And it's their mechanism. It's David Rockefeller's mechanism for bringing down a country, and that's what they're doing in the United States now.
Oh, they most certainly are, and they're doing it from the inside out. And it's. I'll tell you, George, I really don't see too much light right now at the end of the tunnel. What I'm looking at is a very dark tunnel, and we need to fight to get to the light because. Yeah, it's just you're seeing this kind of thing going on I mean, they're not even waiting months no more. It's every other week.
Yeah, and I have a friend here who's TV, doesn't even know what internet is. And she told me a few weeks ago, she said there's a shooting on the television news every single day now. And I told her they're just trying to get you full of fear because they want to take the guns away from law-abiding people like our friend, I won't use his real name, but our veteran friend right here in the neighborhood, who is a Vietnam vet. And they want his guns, and so I told my friend that's the TV person that. So they're hyping it all up on TV now too. They're hyping the fear, they're hyping the terror, and they're hyping all the racial rhetoric. Trying to pit one group against another, and we're all humans. We're all human beings, and that's why this message I have tonight is especially important, because it's a message about harmony and consciousness, ascension of consciousness, growth of us as human beings, and growth of us all together as human beings. And I got to tell you, Mike, I hear your words in my heart about that you're not seeing much light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm an optimistic guy. I'm eternally optimistic. I'm a fighter, and I'm optimistic. But I've been feeling lately, kind of like you have, like you expressed, it's coming down, and that's the fact of the matter.
We have as a people, we have sat back and we have allowed things to get so out of control. It's like for the last few decades, or even longer than that, I should go longer than that, we've been driving in a bus with a driver who has been drinking. And, he had a case of beer sitting there.
George Bush.
Oh, yeah.
We've been driving in a bus with George Bush as the driver.
Yeah, that's right.
Fool, an Alfred E. Newman fool who's drunk.
Well, it even goes further than him. I think it goes back even further than that. And what we've done as passengers is we've sat here and we've watched them get drunker and drunker with our lives. Yeah. And I say, at what point do we put a stop to this? And at some point, the peaceful end of it's going to be out the window. And it looks like it's just about there, the way things are going.
Yeah. Now, and so what I personally do is I'm prepared with my food, safe place, a little bit of supplies of food and water, and guns and ammo and tools and clothing and sleeping bags. That's just as important as the guns. And I know where my line is. I read on the internet news, I heard on news just a few days ago, that they're trying to pass, or maybe they already passed, mandatory vaccines in California for all adults. Now I'm telling, this is one of my lines, I will not take a vaccine. I will not take a chip. These are things I will not do. I'll die first, and I've already made up my mind. And so I'm prepared for when the time comes, or if the time comes, that there are lines, and they hit my line with the census.
Yeah.
And I didn't kill somebody, but if she'd been packing a gun, if she'd gone one step closer physically, that might have happened. But they pushed me all the way to the edge with the census thing. Absolutely will not give them any more information than that to which they're entitled. They were doing all kinds of horribly intrusive things. So anyway, on the other side of it, the peaceful side, there's Karen Hudis, there's Iceland. So there are these success stories, and if you notice the news releases I do, I call them positive truth news. Positive news. It's positive truth. I also still do some of the truth news that are going to give some of the horror, but I do the positive truth news because so few people, we're not looking at that. And it's so easy to look, okay, there's another shooting tonight in Louisiana, and they want us to be upset. They want us to be scared. They want us to go, oh, we have no chance.
So then,
just like they. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say. So then, for a moment, why don't we even pull away from this? Because the mainstream media is going to throw it all over the place, and people across the internet are going to speculate like crazy right off the bat.
Yeah.
And so what I'll do is I'll sit back and wait and see what happens. But I'm going to tell you, I'm already in the wagon, kind of. As I kind of know where this is going, but. It's just getting ridiculous. But one of the listeners says that before the show cut you off earlier, you were actually talking about the smallpox and diseases killing 70 million Indians, and he says then it cut out, and you were going to tell what happened to the other 40 million. And he asked if you could pick back up on that.
Yeah. Well, there were 110 million Americans here when Cortez and Pizarro, Colombo, his real name was Colombo, but, and sometime, Mike, I'll send you a song about Colombo. It's not family, but, it's not mine. It's just, I came across it. But anyway, there were 110 by all estimates, 110 million Americans, North and Central and South America, at the time the Europeans started their so-called conquest. And 70 million were killed by smallpox and syphilis, the European diseases to which they had no immunity. And then the guys like Cortez and Pizarro came in and they murdered and raped and burned alive 30 million more. And this is one of the hugest genocides in human history and known history. 30 million Americans raped and killed and hung and everything, disemboweled while they were living. And this is what Cortez and the Catholic priests did. And all the other Europeans did too. And then 10 million approximately survived. They did it to Geronimo Goyasle, the great spiritual leader. He wasn't a war chief. He wasn't a warrior. He was a great spiritual leader of his people. He was what some people would call a shaman or a shaman, or other people call them medicine men. And Western civilization is eternally derogatory toward all other religions other than Christianity and Judaism. They're eternally derogatory toward all other religions, so they're all called pagan, devil worshippers, and they're all put down by those terms. So I don't use any of those terms. But anyway, that was the rest of what I was saying for your listener there.
Okay. All right. Well, great. I hope that that answers it for him because he definitely wanted to hear the finish up on that. And so, and now looking, even going to what's going on tonight, another shooting, right? So you were talking about frequencies hitting the planet,
Yeah.
energies hitting the
Right.
planet. And I'm kind of curious as to what type of energies are hitting the planet because it seems like in the past decade and a half, people have really gone nuts, haven't they?
Yeah. 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 And what we're seeing, according to now this Mayan calendar, the Tzolkin, the meaning and the purpose of the Tzolkin calendar was essentially pieced together and figured out, or discovered, if you want to use that word, by a man named Carl Calleman, Dr. Carl Calleman. And he realized, he's a scientist. I forget which particular brand, but he's like a PhD scientist from North Europe. And he realized that these different eras of that life, according to science, that life has evolved through, from the single cellular to multicellular, and then it was in the ocean, and it crept out of the ocean and became mammals and birds and plants and differentiated, all that development, and then consciousness developed along with it. Carl realized that the Mayan calendar was correlated to this development of consciousness, and he was amazed. And he continued to work in it, and he just found, he fully developed it, and he found it was strikingly correlative. Nearly 100 1-to-1, we'd say in math, we'd say 1-to-1 correlation. And he did the right thing. So many of these Western scientists and Western civilization, they go, well, I think the Hopi had kivas because it was a ceremony. But they don't go to the Hopi and ask them what the heck the kivas are for. The most obvious thing in the world is go to the Hopis and ask them what are the kivas. But no, they don't want to do that. They want to write books and teach classes and get grant money. And so Carl didn't do that. Dr. Calleman didn't do that. What he did was he went straight to the Mayan priests in Central America. And he asked them, he said, has this got anything to do with the development of consciousness on our planet and in the universe? And they said, oh yeah, that's what it's all about. The Tzolkin calendar and the Mayan calendar is all about development of consciousness and moving through different vibrations, different waves of creation that are vibrations of how our cells and everything in the universe vibrates. So he did the right thing. He went straight to the horse's mouth, so to speak, and he got confirmation. So I really got into this in a big way. But according to the Tzolkin, we're now in the 9th wave of creation. And that's what happened December 28th or 2012, or according to Dr. Calleman's calculations, it happened in October of 2011. But we've entered the 5th world, or the 9th wave of creation. And now it's a time where all the evil and the power and the materialism and the corruption is being exposed.
Yeah, it is being
according
exposed
to the Maya.
Well,
and so we're seeing, in answering your question, we're seeing everything bubble to the surface. All this corruption and horrible human misbehavior, and this is Western civilization. American Indians don't behave like this. Aborigines in Australia, the Maori in New Zealand, they don't act like this. It's Western man. It's Western civilization. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too.
Well, yeah, and it would seem that civilizations that are similar to American type the way Western civilizations. There's some kind of mind control going on here, or it's just that we have the CIA. I don't know which it is, but for these things to keep going, I mean, because how come 10 years ago people weren't just walking into theaters and shooting them? So, I see that now there's an agenda on the guns, and now you've got people doing that. So, but why are people crazy enough to do it? That's what I'm not getting.
Well, according to one, and I don't want to mention your competition's name on the air or anything, but a big independent, so-called independent news network that's internet-based, it's highly doubtful that it's actually independent news.
You can mention whoever you want. That's okay. Go ahead.
Well, AJ, it's highly doubtful that it's actually independent at this point, because his quotient of truth dropped from 85% to under 25%, and it's just hyping the same old things, the war and all that stuff. But according to him, this news network, according to them, these shootings are almost all a mind control kind of thing. It's related to the drugs. Every one of them that I've looked at, except one in the last 20 years, was a person who was on these psychotropic drugs, psychiatric drugs. They have known and strong side effects of causing people to commit homicides and mass homicides and suicide. They have, and when the people go on these drugs, you're on them forever. You can't get off them. If they stop taking the drugs, that's when these horrendous things happen. And it could be that it's the side effects of these drugs that they're on. And the other thing is, these are prescription medications. And the other thing is that what this guy AJ says is that they're under mind control, and they're actually given commands. And I haven't delved a whole lot into this. People have asked me about it quite a bit, but I'm not sure how I'm just not particularly interested in delving into it, so I haven't researched it.
Well, for me, I mean, if I had to say what I feel is going on based on everything I've looked at, it would appear to me that these people who are involved in all these shootings are some sort of soldier for somebody, and they're being sent in to do this. And I would guess it's a CIA operation, and I'm not saying it because of Alex Jones or any of those other people. It's just that it's been proven time and time again that they get involved with things like this, and we can see how they're trying to drive race wars and all these other things. And so that's what I feel is happening right now.
Right. And to me, I already know who's doing it and why, so I don't have to actually look at the mechanism. I don't feel like a need. Are the pancakes made of flour and water or Bisquick and water? I don't have to look at that because I know they're pancakes. I can see that it's a pancake, So I'm not getting hungry. Are there eggs in it or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
You see my point?
Right.
That I know what it is and I know why it's happening. It's just like tuning in and listening to some bozo in the White House talk. I don't ever have to do that. I haven't done that since, for 15 years or 12 years. So I already know what they're going to say. It doesn't matter. I already know what they're talking about. So I don't need to do that.
And you know what? I mean, it's so catchy too, because look what's happening. Look how they get everybody to start talking about their dirt.
Yeah.
But you have to, because there's people out there who are thinking, oh geez, another one of those truther people going off the wall shooting somebody. And it's really it's aggravating to me that there's so many people who fall for this, and
that's again at the core of what we're talking about with the spiritual things. And the Hopis say this. The Hopis say, and they've always said, as far as I can tell, and I've read books written about them in the early 1900s and late 1800s, they say that they are creating the world. In other words, people, we are creating the world. In the Mayan calendar, Maya say we create the world. Now, modern contemporary people, of course the Mayan are contemporary like we talked about, but the people like Windrider, I think her first name's Kiara, if I remember right, Kiara Windrider, she says we're creating our world, our reality. We are literally creating reality by what we think about. And there's a word people use for that, co-creation. Big word, just means if I think about this shooting, then all these people around the whole planet are thinking about the shooting, then it makes it real, it instantiates it, and gets it into our group consciousness, and it becomes more real than I want it to be. On the other hand, if we think about Karen Hudis in Iceland and the positive truth stories, the positive news, Iceland kicking out the banksters, refusing to do a bailout, refusing to make their people pay for the bank criminals stealing of their money. And then look at 2 years later, Iceland is one of the strongest economies on the planet in the developed world. Huge success story. So let's look at the positive things, and the Maya said that too. And your grandmother, if you remember, your grandmother said that. Think good thoughts. Remember? I've had girlfriends that have said that. Think good thoughts. And there's a real element of truth to that. Think good thoughts. But, of course, it's hard to do that when they're shooting and breaking your door down.
Well, and it is. And for me, I could look at this and, wow, I get as frustrated as everybody else does. At the same token, I mean, I could turn it off right now, and I already know how it's going to play out. I already, I've seen this show before. It's a rerun. And so for me to sit here, and, of course, the mainstream media will just keep running it and running it and running it,
Right.
So here we go again, I say. And so, yeah, you're right. We do need to talk about more positive things, at least once in a while. Unfortunately, I'm obligated to cover these things when they happen. But nevertheless...
No, I know, and I understand your position, and I'm in it too, because I'm the eternal... I've been called in interviews, and they're online. Interviewers have called me George McClure is without a doubt one of the most peaceful, loving human beings on the planet. Wow, what a thing to have said about you, And then I want to, I write the positive news and everything, and I'm all involved in this spiritual ascension of mankind. But I'm with you 100 completely, Mike. It's just, it's getting into my heart. It's disheartening.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to fight this one way or another. Now, Karen Hudis says, and I want everybody to go listen to her. She says she was in the World Bank, and she did what her job was, to report some corruption, and they fired her and threatened her and did all these things to her. And she took them on because she's a bulldog. She's another one of us. You're another one of me. You're another me, and I'm another you. And she took them on, and she's working at a very high level, relatively speaking, so she can get things directly to the legislature of the UK. She can go talk to Congress people in the U.S. and governors, and she does. But she says that, and this is true, that there are games. In fact, when I left graduate school, a company in Austin wanted to hire me to develop these games, these gaming modules, that in her case, she plugs in just thousands and thousands and thousands of data points, maybe even millions of data points about the economy and political structure and the monetary systems all around the planet. and then it spits out its predictions, and it has predicted that with 90 to 95% probability that the rule of law in doing what's right is going to win in this conflict that we're in right now. So there's only a 5 to 10% chance that we don't make it, and they succeed with their imposing their tyranny, for the next 10,000 years is essentially what it's going to be.
That's right, George, and I believe that too. I believe in the end, it's going to be worse because people wait so long. But in the end, whatever it comes down to, in the end, we will win. And even if that means that we all get wiped out, we still win because we're spiritual beings. The people always win revolutions. They always win. The people always win. I may give my life for this matter, and I will. I have drawn my line in the sand, and I know where I won't go, I won't go beyond this point. They're going to have to kill me. And I'm probably going to hopefully I'll take one or more of them with me when I go. But we may have to give our lives for this. I may have to give my life. I'm not telling anybody else what to do. And we have to be prepared to do that. I think for real change to happen, we have to be prepared to do that. I agree.
What they're doing is absolutely horrendous. There's a great guy on the internet, on YouTube. He's an American Indian. Guy is fantastic. He said, he was talking about, I think he's Lakota or something like that, Dakotas. He was talking about some of the history of his people, when white man came in and decimated all his people. But he said, now, and then they put us on reservations and don't give us running water or toilets or anything and expect us to survive. And he said, now all of America is a reservation. Now everybody living in the United States is an Indian on a reservation. And that's exactly true. This guy's good.
Yeah.
He hit the nail on the head.
That absolutely makes sense. And that's basically what it is. We're all on a reservation. They want to, and I was thinking of something else too. I think yesterday I may have been really contemplating this, and that is with the eating. You look at I was going to have a guest on in the first 20 minutes tonight to talk about this, and he'll be coming on. But he pointed something out to me that you look at the FDA, their guidelines to a healthy American meal, and it is far from healthy. It is the most unhealthy thing. And I'm thinking this has all been part of the depopulation program right from the start. It had to have been, because they know that, you're drinking a glass of milk is like having a glass of bacon. I mean, it's no different, but they act like it's so healthy. Give it to your kids. Clog their arteries. It's just
right. This has been Rockefeller's plan from the beginning. I mean, after all, David Rockefeller's father and grandfather, John D. Rockefeller, invented allopathic medicine. They invented hospitals. They invented all this stuff. And before that, we were all like in the early 1900s, which would be like my grandmother's generation. My father, when he was a boy, all the healing was done homeopathically, as homeopathy. They knew the right herbs and things to eat, and people ate real food, and it wasn't processed food and genetically modified and so on. And David Rockefeller either was the co-creator, the creator, or the chairperson of the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, the World Health Organization, so-called. Well, they're really there just to see that the world's populations are unhealthy and don't have good nutrition. He's the chair of the thing, So you got to look at who started these things. But let's talk about a little bit about living in harmony.
Yeah, let's do that.
As long as we're, is that okay?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, let's do that. Let's get off the doom and gloom and get into the more pleasant. Because I'd like to also talk about our solar system and the possibilities of life, and with everything going on now with the pictures coming back from Pluto, and that I think that's good harmony. The knowing that Yeah. So all right, but go ahead, pick up where you'd like, and we'll let the mainstream media talk about their shooting.
Right. Okay. Living in harmony. Plant something, grow something, feel the earth with your fingers and your toes. Birth some animals. Get some animals and let them have offspring. It's a miracle. Turn off your internal dialogue. This is how to live in harmony. From my perspective. Turn off your internal dialogue. Turn off your internal clock. Get outside of time. It makes you younger, by the way, because you don't age when you're outside of time. Personal note, I go into this state when I play music, and I look 20 years younger than my actual earth age, because when I go into music, I go into a state where I'm outside of time, and then you don't age. How do you turn off your internal dialogue? Now, there are people like Carlos Castaneda and others who have studied this and written about it. How do you turn off your internal dialogue? Be still. Listen. Turn off your internal clock and voice. Experience the moment. Okay, that's easy to say. How do we do it? Control your dreams. Learn to be aware during dreaming. You run a pilot or supervisory consciousness while you're dreaming. Wake yourself up in the dream and continue dreaming. If you have a recurrent dream, you can prime yourself before you go to sleep. Quote, I'm going to wake up, and when I get to this point in the dream, I'm going to be conscious. You'll find that you can do this with practice. Now, how I learned to do this was as a child. I had horrible, horrible recurring nightmares, so bad I didn't want to go to sleep. I'd try my hardest not to let myself go to sleep. And they were so bad, Mike, that after a while I said, I've got to wake myself up out of this when it happens. Because I'd wake up just shuddering and, crying, covered with sweat. So I said, I got to wake myself up when I start going into this horrible thing. And I actually learned how to do it. When you can wake yourself up in your dream, you'll find your conscious mind is working too. You can wake yourself up or allow the dream to continue. Now, what I did, Mike, was I would shout at myself. I'd shout my name over and over. I shouted my name as loud as I could. And then I found that I woke up. And before I woke all the way up, I had my conscious mind going at the same time the dream was continuing. So I had both going on at once. You can wake yourself up or allow the dream to continue. Try both. Then the next thing you can do, you can learn how to fly in your dreams, which you can do, which I know. I fly in my dreams. So you can learn how to fly in your dreams. Prime yourself ahead of time and use your supervisory, your autopilot, to tell yourself commands like fly. Instead of shouting your name and saying, wake up, like Mike, wake up. Mike, instead of doing that, once you got so you can do that, then you can shout, fly. Well, or you can say, continue dreaming.
I've had that happen before where I'll doze off, getting into a sound sleep, and I'll hear somebody yell. It sounds like somebody yelled, Mike. Yeah. And man, it scares the living daylights out of me. I jump up, and I'm like, did you just yell at me? And no, I didn't yell at you. It's like, wow, I heard somebody yell in my head.
Right. Well, now, there are those things. I forget what they call it. There's a name for it that the military uses, and they can actually contact you. Remote viewing is what they call it. They can actually contact you at that moment you're between consciousness and falling to sleep, they can contact you and actually say things in your mind, and it sounds like a real voice in your head. And I think some of the theories about these shootings is they put people on these psychotropic drugs, and then they put them in a mind control program, and they can give them commands similar to that.
Yeah. That's...
So back to this. Once you've mastered these things in your dreams, you can learn to fly and wake up and keep dreaming in the conscious plane. So once you've learned how to fly and wake up in dreaming state, then you can learn how to do these things in the conscious state. White man calls practitioners of these arts shaman or shaman. They also call them medicine men or chiefs or chieftains. What they really are is leaders. The people who can do this are leaders of the people. They have great spiritual powers, and as such often are healers as well, just like the Monique or deer hand in the Mayan calendar and day glyphs. Mastering flying, the practitioner moves on, or what white man would call a shaman, moves on to occupying a bird or animal's frame, such as eagle or crow. You may have a spirit animal. Say your spirit animal is crow. Then so you've learned how to fly in your dreams, and then you learn how to control and fly in your conscious state, and then you learn how to move yourself into, say, a crow's body or a deer's body or a wildcat's body. Let's just say crow. Then you become inside the crow, and it's flying around. You're seeing out of its eyes. You open your mouth, and you're going caw, caw, caw. You have the same experiences as the crow, seeing the fields below as the bird flies and making crow-so stretching wings. In time, the practitioner returns to his own frame. He returns to his own body and comes back into consciousness. But this is moving on into shamanism, or some of the American Indian and Siberian, the people in Russia, native Siberians, they all do this too. Spiritual men or practitioners can then move to the moon, to other locations in the solar system. So they've learned how to take over the body of a crow or a panther. Then they can move to the moon and other locations, solar system, and even beyond. White man calls this time-space travel. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. Continuing, the practitioners of this highly developed art can relocate stones and rocks and objects, so they can move a rock the size of a house. They can shape them. And we have the Inca stoneworks. The building-sized stones moved hundreds of miles from their quarry points and joined so perfectly that they stand today, and a piece of paper can't be inserted between the irregular shaped blocks. No mortar or sealant was used. Excuse me.
Well,
so Machu Picchu and great Inca stoneworks could have actually been built using this technology. It may not have been, but it could have been. So these are all things that the mind can do.
Yeah, and we've noticed that certain agencies and different, I guess whatever you want to call them, have been doing these experiments, scientists, what have you, with the mind, where I've seen it where they're able to put a cap on one guy, a cap on the other guy, or headgear, or whatever you want to call it, and one guy could control another guy's body with thought. Now, they've come pretty close. They've been wanting to find the God particle and all these things of the mind, and they're basically, figuring out, they've reverse engineered the human being.
Well, yeah, and there was a debate when I was in graduate school and before in AI. I was in artificial intelligence and theory of computation, which is way at the front end of human thought and development. And there was a debate back then. Can you make a human being and a mind by duplicating it cell by cell and chemical by chemical, or is there something, or can you only make a brain, the physical thing, and it still won't be a human mind? You know, is there a difference between mind and brain? Is there a difference between the physical thing and what you and I are? Is there a difference? And that was a debate way back when. But in my youth, I followed front-end developments of science. I read Scientific American at about age 15. I started. And it was obvious to me that they were actually creating the world as they created new concepts, because they'd think up a new way, like mathematically or scientifically, of describing, you know, first it was Niels Bohr back in 1890 and 1920, and Einstein and Niels Bohr and Heisenberg. These guys said, well, it's Heisenberg and Bohr, really, and then Einstein came after them. But they said, well, there's this little thing called an atom, and it's got a nucleus and it's got electrons spinning around it. And they said it's got to be true because we figured it out, and matter behaves that way. And then after a while, by the time I was in college, well, it wasn't just electrons and the nucleus anymore. Excuse me. All of a sudden it was, well, there are muons and pions and mesons and all these subatomic particles, and it goes on forever. So it became apparent to me that they're just creating this. You know, they figure it out and test it, and then, wow, it's real.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I look at it, is we literally create it. And I'd rather create something else other than this matrix thing.
Oh, I absolutely would too. And George, if you wouldn't mind, hang on one more time. We've got one more break we've got to get out of the way here, and then you and I will come back and talk some more. We've recently got some pictures of Jupiter, or not Jupiter, but Pluto, and they look pretty interesting. We've had interesting photos come back from Mars and all these other places, and I'm thinking, and now they just announced that there's another planet within our galaxy that is at the same exact distance from its sun as Earth. It is like a twin Earth, and they're saying that there could be life. Do you think that they're slowly conditioning us for a worldwide disclosure now?
Well, I don't think so much as conditioning so much, because truth trumps all. Truth trumps everything. And I think it's more like they're just afraid the truth is going to come out anyway, because there are something like 10 million amateur astronomers around the world that have 3-foot telescopes in their backyard, and they're going to see it anyway. You know, and nothing's going to keep them quiet, or whatever it is, 100 million.
Right.
So, but, you know, we hear these things, they say, people go, well, the powers that be, you know, Rockefeller and the Guggenheim Group and the Bilderberger Group and the top 1%, they're afraid that people will panic. Well, actually, in reality, Mike, we're not going to panic. People don't panic. People are actually really smart. And people have a lot more going on than that to just go into a panic mode because they saw a flying saucer, or because there's another planet incoming that may strike Earth. What they're afraid of, what Rockefeller and Rothschild are afraid of, is that when I look up in the sky and I see an inbound planet, you know, Planet X or whatever you want, a dark twin to Earth, I'm not going to be frightened. It's a glorious, incredibly glorious moment. That's why the Bible wrote all about it, the stars of David and all that. This is incredible stuff. It bonds people instantly. People are awestruck, and we're all bonded together instantly. That's what Rockefeller's afraid of. He knows that humanity will come together in this instantaneously and be of like mind on something. We'll be awestruck, we'll be amazed, and we'll be united immediately. That's what they're afraid of, because they don't want to give up their control over us that they've had for the last 10,000 years.
Well,
That's what they're afraid of.
I was thinking that what they're going to do is to avoid themselves having to say, hey, we've lied to you all this time. Instead, they're going to say, well, hey, look what we found. Hey, I guess we're not alone. And try to sweep everything they've hit under the rug. Now, one of our listeners, and I'm sure many people think this, as a matter of fact, is that they're setting us up for a false flag alien invasion. And I'm wondering, how do the ETs feel about that?
Yeah, I've thought that for years.
Mm-hmm. Well,
ever since, I read in the Scientific American, is back in the 90s, that they announced, as research briefs and research articles, and they said, well, we've got these giant holograms. They're essentially holograms that they project up into the sky, and they could project a Jesus up there or whatever they want. This was like almost 20 years ago. So I knew since then that, they're going to be fiddling around with these things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely.
See, but for me, it doesn't matter if it's real aliens or even they're fake ones. I'm not going to be panicking. Because, they've been around us for so long and they've not done anything.
Oh, yeah.
So if we start
they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to interfere. So they won't. If they had wanted to, with a superior technology to get here from Alpha Centauri, and you don't think they could destroy us? Of course they could. They're not allowed to.
Well, all they would have to do is blow up all our nuclear facilities, and we'd be toast. I mean, it'd be that easy now. So,
yeah. But now, this is interesting about, you said there's an announcement of an Earth's twin, and people, now the Maya people were far superior to Western man in their studies and understandings of astronomy. They were very advanced mathematically. They used a math system they didn't count on decimal system 10, they counted on vigesimal, which is base 20 system. So they were very advanced. And they said this all along. There's a dark twin to Earth, and that there's another. And the Inca were even more advanced in their understandings of astronomy. And by the way, the Kiva, which people still today, I still hear it, I listen to, we don't know what the Kiva is. Maybe they were doing ceremonies twice a year during solstice. Well, if you just ask the people, they'll tell you what the Kivas were, Mike. And Inca had them too. The Inca and the Mayan and the Hopi and the Aztec, they all had kivas. Now, a kiva is a perfectly round, sunken chamber. It's like a round silo made of rock, except it goes downward and it's open, it's empty. And what they did with the kivas, it's always this big mystery with white man. Westerns, what were they for? What they did with them is they filled them with water, and the water inside, when it's laying in the ground like that, at night, you can study the heavens, and it's perfectly still. It's a perfect mirror. It's better than Western man's mirrors. You can see the stars better than you can with a telescope. And what they were doing was studying the stars. And if you look at what the Inca did, their picture of the heavens, of all the stars and the constellations and the universe, they're completely mirror image backward. Why are they that way? Because they were looking at the water and looking at the sky mirror image in their mirror. So that's what kivas are. But anyway, I think it's delightful if they're announcing that they found a dark twin or a twin to the Earth, because that just means science is catching up to what all these other civilizations knew thousands and thousands of years ago.
That's true, which would mean that there was far more advanced civilizations before us, or that there was, interference from outside. Now, you said that they're not allowed to, and I believe that, but I think that there's some, just like you would get, say, a country who's not allowed to do things, but they find a way to do it. I think that there's some that have interfered because we see evidence that they've been here. At least, for those of us in the know, we've seen evidence that we've been visited and this and that. So I think that's a little bit of interference. We've heard of nuclear weapons being disarmed by them. We've heard of fighter pilots chasing them, and so at that point, I guess what I'm saying is, so we've got good ones and bad ones, just like here on Earth, apparently.
That may be, and I have no knowledge of that. I don't know about that. I made a decision a long time ago when all this stuff started unfolding. I made a decision that I'm an Earthling. I love Earth. I'm of the Earth, and this is where I'm going to make my fight. I don't want to go to the stars. I made my decision. I don't want to join those people who are making voyages out. I've decided, I've chosen to stay on Earth. I love Earth. It's like, to me, it's a Mother Earth. I grew up outside the system. I grew up a stranger in a strange land. No television. Nature was my place of solace. I spent hours, days, years, months in nature by myself. It was a safe place for me, and that's where I learned all my lessons of how things work, because I didn't have anything else.
Right.
And, of course, I had a secret world of music. I could tune in this AM radio station at night. I'm of the generation that AM was what was there, and I could get this radio station at night and hear all these fabulous sounds. That was another secret world of mine. But anyway, so I grew up outside of this Western civilization. I was never a part of it. I was never privy to it. I was never allowed to be part of it. So I've always seen through it. I'm a truth seer as well as a truth teller. I see the truth. I just see it, literally. And so in seeing, in a way, I've always expected this. I've always seen it. I read the George Orwell book, 1984, like you and everybody else has. I said, well, mind blower. I knew this was coming because this is how the people act. This is how and so I've seen it from the beginning. And what Grandfather says, and you can hear Grandfather if you go to my website, go to georgemcclure.net, and Grandfather's there in a YouTube video. Grandfather says, if you don't learn how to grow something, get your hands in the dirt, and learn how to take care of yourself, it's very doubtful that you will make it through this.
That's right. That's right.
And we're at a point now where we have to be doing that because, as you said, this whole thing's coming apart, and it's not every month or every year now. It's like they're escalating. What is it? Every week or every day now they're going to start these.
Right. And George, I'm concerned about society as a whole, and here's why: is because, as you know, people for decades have been conditioned to back when I was growing up, Dad had. We'd work out in the gardens out there with them. We'd have tomatoes and different things growing, fruit trees, and you look at now, and everyone's just, well, I'm going to Walmart to get my groceries, and well, one day those shelves are not going to be available to you all, and how many people don't have a plan? Their plan's going to be to rob you or me, and that's going to be a bad move.
Right. Well, the cities are going to be the bad place to be because people don't have access water, even, water or food. And it's going to become chaotic in cities. And so, that's what these UN forces are doing, right? The UN forces are moving on into North America in the tanks and the armored vehicles and everything else. They're preparing for that. But if you're in the country, you're going to be much better off or if you're growing a garden in your backyard. But it's going to get very, very nasty unless we can stop it and turn it around.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure we can. I don't want to sound like the black cloud over the country here, but I'm not so sure we can. I think we could, but what it would take to do it, I'm not so sure that people are up for the task. I think they're all waiting for somebody to come knock at their door, and at that point, somebody's going to probably wind up getting shot, and it's going to be on like a pot of neck bones, as they say here in the South.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, like we pointed out, in order to understand a better way, let's understand what's wrong with this way. Well, David Rockefeller and Jacob Rothschild are the head of the viper. They're the head of the snake. The old adage, you cut off the head of the snake and you kill the snake, but you cut off the tail and the rattlers, and they just grow right back. And that's why I'm always saying it's one person. It's David Rockefeller, and then behind the screen it's Jacob Rothschild. That's why I'm always saying that. You cut off the head of the snake and you kill the snake. But like I pointed out, we pointed out the fundamental flaws in the Gregorian calendar, and then we can look at another calendar that maybe makes more sense, the Mayan Tzolkin, that correlates to the gestation period of people, and it marks every 3 or every 5 eclipses. 3 eclipses fit perfectly into every 260-day cycle. And now let's look at some of the fundamental flaws in Western civilization, which means Western science. They have a concept of time that's linear. It's called linearity, linear time. And there's actually, in reality, there's absolutely no evidence in the universe that time is linear. In fact, all the evidence is that everything is cyclical. So let's look at this tadpole thing. Now, when I was a boy, and I think all boys are absolutely fascinated with tadpoles and frogs. They go through a period. You go through a period, I don't know, like 7 or 8 or something.
I've got 1 million frogs around here right now, and I'm wondering, where are they coming from? Don't they start in water? And I'm thinking, well, how the hell are they getting way over here? Because I don't have water near me. Anyways.
And I think, when I was a boy, a lot of girls were fascinated with them too. So and I had this pond next. I'd go over the pond every day and wade around in it. Well, I saw these tadpoles, and they're swimming around. They have a tail, and then they start growing little tiny feet. I go over there every day. They're growing little feet. I'm amazed. And then their tail drops off, and they crawl up on land, and they're little frogs. Blew my mind. And then I realized that those masses of clear things stuck to the reeds were actually egg masses. And so I started watching the egg masses. At first the eggs were clear, then they got milky, and then there was a little wriggling thing in the center of each egg. And then it got bigger. I said, those are little tadpoles. So it was obvious to me at age 7 or 8 that you go, how is this happening? Why is this happening? And then the adult frogs are making, I knew enough at that point that the mommy and daddy frog made those eggs. I knew that. And so it was a cycle, and then I realized, of course, the adult frogs burrow into the mud and go through the winter, and then they come up in the spring and they do the egg thing. So it was obvious to me, it's a cycle. There's no evidence of linearity of anything. It's just a cycle. It's circular, and it goes around and around and around. And if you think about it in more complex detail, the way Western science does, well, there's the DNA in there and it's passing on and so on. It goes on forever.
Yeah.
But Western man says, Western science and Western civilization is built on this concept called empiricism. And empiricism says the only thing that's real, reality, is what I can see and what I can hear and what I can taste, what I can smell, and, what I can touch with my fingertips. That's reality, and nothing else is reality. So if that's your definition of reality, it's what I can see, hear, feel, and touch, that means that spirituality is not part of reality, that your soul is not part of reality, your heart is not part of reality, emotions are not real. And if you look at science, that's what science says. Emotions aren't real, that's psychology, that's voodoo, that's not real science. And they go, well, the whole soul doesn't exist. I can't see it or measure it or I can't hear it. So soul doesn't exist. That's Western science. That's Western man. That's white man, so-called. Of course, now it's not just white man. Can't get into this color thing. It's black man, it's red man, it's yellow man, and it's white man. It's all, what it is the developed world, Western civilization. But they have a concept of all these other things aren't real. So spirituality and soul aren't real. And so they say, they look at a little baby being born, and they go, that must be where it starts. And then they look at their grandfather, grandmother pass, they expire, and they go, that's where it ends, because they can't talk to me anymore. So my life begins and ends. It begins at birth and ends at death. Therefore, time is linear and my life is linear. But they're ignoring all these other things, like soul and heart and spirit. They're ignoring that I'm a product of my father's sperm and my mother's egg. That came from them, and they were living before. They're ignoring what I'm going to pass on and continue. So it's actually, in reality, when you just look a little bit more, it's circular, it goes on forever. There's no evidence that it actually started at a discrete point or will end at a discrete point. And another way I look at, okay, so my body expires, I go out, lay out there, well, the vulture comes and picks out my eyeballs and goes into its stomach and feeds it. The microbes come and break down my body, and the nutrients in my body, which came from Earth, are returned to Earth, right? Or if they burn your body, then it's returned to Earth, it just goes out in the smoke. So it goes on forever. Things don't just end, so there's no linearity of time. Yet they have this thing called Big Bang Theory, where they have to describe, they feel the need to describe how the universe started. I don't know why. I don't feel the need to describe how it started. I know it's been going forever. It's going to go forever after I leave this place of consciousness.
That's right.
I can tell that. It's self-evident. It's obvious. So I don't have to answer that, but these guys, they feel the need to say, well, how did it all start? So because they have this concept of the linearity of time, they say, well, it all started with a Big Bang, even though there's absolutely no evidence that it ever did. There's no evidence whatsoever that it actually started at a discrete moment. How come it couldn't have been going on forever? It's more likely that it's been going on forever, because everything I observe in the natural world goes on forever. And apparently was going on forever before I ever got around here.
It is, George,
yeah.
It is impossible. I've tried it many times, and it gets me where I just want to jump up, scream at the top of my lungs, and run like crazy through the house. But I've tried to sit here and think about before it all began, and I'm thinking, well, there always had to have been something. You can't just come up with something out of nothing, right?
Yeah. Well, with the Big Bang Theory, and that's an excellent point. With the Big Bang Theory, they go, well, it all started with a Big Bang. Well, Big Bang of what? Well, this matter. Well, what was this matter? They don't have an answer for that. It was just a gob of stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
It was like a clown's car. All of a sudden, all these planets just start popping out of it.
Right. I mean, it's just absurd if you think about it, that, you know, they're trying to answer how it started, but they don't ever even answer that. And it's like, why don't you answer it? But, and they have a linear concept. And they say the Big Bang Theory, we can talk about it for just, it's real quick to get a grasp of it. They say that it all started because and this is a fact that I can see, I can look through a telescope and see this, that everything in the observable universe is spreading apart from everything else at an equal rate. So they call it the expanding universe. Everything's expanding. It's not expanding from a central point. Everything's moving away from everything else. Oh, okay, I'm cool with that. I don't feel the need to answer why, but they do. So they say, well, it had to have started with an explosion because that's the only thing we can figure out that makes everything expand.
Well, it's all they think of is exploding things. I know. So, but go ahead. So what do you think?
Yeah. So they go, well, it really can't be an explosion because if you just visualize a tennis ball down in the corner of the room you're in right now, just visualize there's a tennis ball down there. And the thing explodes like it's plastic explosive, and it explodes. Well, everything's going to move away from that center point, the little sphere, the little ball. Everything's going to move away from that sphere, that center point. But that's not what's happening in the universe. In the universe, everything's moving apart from everything else. It's expanding. So they go, well, it couldn't have been a ball that exploded then. It had to be something in the shape of a donut. And the donut exploded. And because it's a donut, not a ball, that explains why everything's moving away from everything else at an equal speed, which is patently absurd. It's patently stupid. You know, if I've got a donut sitting down there on the floor made of plastic, and it explodes, I guarantee you, man, everything's still moving away from that center donut point. You know?
Right.
This is how ridiculous they are. And that's the Big Bang Theory. And notice it's called a theory. It's very important to listen to the words. If it's called a theory, that means they don't know it. Like the theory of relativity, the special theory, or what was the theory of evolution. Notice it's called a theory because they don't know for sure. There's not solid, concrete evidence for it.
Yeah,
and
that's
that means
true.
You have to examine it. You need to question it.
Yeah, and that's
true. It might
true.
be true, but it might be true, but it might not be true.
And they do, and they have a lot of theories, and even when they, and they'll put these things in textbooks to teach our kids, and then when they find out they're wrong, they don't go back and correct these things. So
exactly,
that's a problem too. And so and they say that eventually our moon is going to move so far away from us. And that we're going to move so far away from everything else. So, eventually that will happen, right? If we don't get hit with something first.
Well, it will, but, I'll tell you, Mike, my perspective is, why should I worry about it? I'm more interested in growing some fruit or some potatoes or something to live on.
Very well said. Yeah, why worry about things you can't control, right?
Yeah, exactly, precisely.
Yeah, that's
so. What do you think? What do you think, Mike, about Karen Hudes and turning around in the rule of law and right and wrong, superseding all this criminality? What do you think? Or are we all going to wipe out first? What do you think?
Well, I think the way I look at it is, for me, it's when people are out doing like what she's doing. I hope that they have really good protection, and if they don't, and nothing happens to them, I sometimes wonder. So, I'm not sure. I think she's very brave to be doing what she's doing, and and that's what we need: more people to get involved in higher places, to step up and do what needs to be done. All I could say is for all these people, I don't know who's real and who's not. All of them. Some people say, well, this one's a phony and that one's a phony. And I simply say, like, some guys come out and say, well, I was with the Illuminati and I broke free. And I'm wondering, well, why are they letting this guy talk and not knocking him off?
Yeah. I'm really deeply skeptical about people that I have a good close friend, and I went up to Alaska during the pipeline, and I sat and talked with these people, and I'm a chaplain, and they told me their inner secrets, and I'm going to sell them to you in a book or in a CD, just $10.95,
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, I'm deeply skeptical. They're either a mouthpiece for David Rockefeller, or they're just making money off of whatever they're doing.
Right, but I've had Karen on the show, and I like her, and she seems to be doing some good work. I don't have anything bad or negative to say about her. Really about well, I can't say about anybody, because there are some out there that I have things to say about, but I won't. But
yeah.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this: what is your position? I mean, the whole NASA workings and all that. What is your position on Planet X? And I know you and I talked about this a while back on another show, The Last Frequency. But I'm wondering, where do you stand on that now today? And not that you'd worry about it, because again, why worry about something you can't control? But
I'm fascinated with that kind of thing. Well, I'm thrilled that you told me tonight that a twin Earth was found, because all the ancient cultures have been talking about this forever, the dark twin. And the Planet X, I'm still trying to clarify in my mind if it's Sedna or not, because Sedna is running on a 3,200-year orbit, and it seems like it possibly is Planet X, but then there are all these other aberrations in the outer planet's orbits that are clearly indicating there's another body or more than multiple bodies in our solar system that are on contrary orbits like Sedna is. And I think it would be the wonder of the ages if the thing comes by. That's what I think. I read Velikovsky as a boy, Immanuel Velikovsky. I still have 2 of his books on my shelf right next to my desk. As just phenomenal work the guy did. And Worlds in Collision is the title of one of his books. Of course, he was absolutely ostracized, Russian scientist. But this stuff is fascinating to me, and there's so much evidence for it. What he said was either a huge Planet X or a huge heavenly body of another sort came by and actually caused Mars to fall out of its orbit. And Mars and Earth almost collided, and they exchanged atmosphere, and that's when Mars lost its atmosphere and most of its water. And that explains why there are canals on Mars, right?
Sure.
And polar ice caps. I mean, it's ice on the polar caps. When I was a boy, I'm in the generation where when I was young, they said the polar caps of Mars are made of frozen carbon dioxide. I said to myself, why should that be? And now it turns out, it's water, it's ice, and common sense has a way of winning out, just like truth does. But I'm fascinated with this stuff, Mike, and I don't know if Planet X is incoming, but I sure as hell hope so. To me, this would be the event of the ages, and I'm here to witness it. What could be more spectacular? What could be more spectacular than living through something like Velikovsky wrote about? the exchange of atmospheres of planets and stuff. I just think it would be fabulous.
Oh, I think
I hope it's true.
Living through it, and I guess living through it would be good, depending on what the living is going to be like. If it's going to be where every man for himself, no water, no food, none of that. That's kind of. But I guess it would be a fascinating sight. Although a good thing that'd be the last pair of pants that I have to wear.
Yeah, I hear you. What am I going to do when my shoes wear out?
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. Well, that's why we must listen to Grandfather, and we must all be growing our gardens and be independent. This grid, the energy grid, the fuel grid for our vehicles, the electrical energy grid, the food grid, the allopathic medical grid, they're all David Rockefeller. They're all Rockefellerian. We can talk about the lower levels of people, certainly that it diversifies, but it's all bad. And it's being dependent on it is going to be the end of us.
Well, and I
think we need to be off of that, and then we can kind of stand there in the field with a pitchfork in one hand and a hoe in the other, and hopefully we won't be so terrified.
George, I think that this power grid is kind of for us. I think that they've got something much better in store for themselves, because I'd be curious as to what's powering their underground cities and facilities. I'm sure they're not hooked to the same power grid we are.
Well, then I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm not certain, but I'm sure. Then you get into the things like alternative energies, which I was studying several years ago, and I actually talked to one cat down in Mississippi on the phone who's been building cars that run on water and stuff like that, slurry running internal combustion motors. And I considered for a little while getting into that. Instead, I designed and built a passive solar off-grid micro farm. I call it a micro farm. It's not a mini farm, 20 acres. This is a micro farm. It's like 1.2 acres. And so I got into doing that instead, with fruit trees and everything on it. But I think alternative energies, they're certainly using them. There's no doubt about it. There's certified reports back when George Bush was the president of house-sized things floating over the Texas flatlands there going toward his house and, his ranch. And, with no sound, with no visible means of, there's absolutely alternative energy going on. And there are a lot of people studying it, and there's so many people doing it all over the planet that they can't contain it anymore. That's why they're trying to shut the whole thing down and enslave the civilization, the population of humanity before we achieve this consciousness explosion, before we achieve this ascension of consciousness into a more spiritual plane where we're all together. Because I talk to everybody. I talk to all my neighbors. I talk to everybody everywhere I go. Nobody wants to kill anybody. Nobody wants to hurt anybody. Everybody just wants the same things. We want some good food and a warm place to live, and raise our children, and have books to read or music or whatever people do. Everybody wants the same thing. It's only the controllers that want something different.
That's right. And, thank God for the internet, not just because of what we do here, but because of, through the years, the different people I've been able to connect with around the world. And it turns out, growing up, I was always told, oh, Russians hate you and these people hate you and they want you dead. And,
right.
No, they don't. They want peace and they want their families to be okay and healthy, just like us. And what we've
absolutely.
we've had these controllers who have tried to, it's like we're the pit bulls, and we're in these dog fights, and they want to throw us in the ring against each other. Go kill him, Spike, kill him.
Exactly. Well, that's the old plan. That's this 10,000-year-old engineering. It started back with the Sumerians, and now I hear the same thing. They create the wars. And now it's Jacob Rothschild is the guy's name. And they lend money to both sides. Lockheed Martin and MacDoug and Halliburton, they sell weapons, and General Electric is the biggest weapons manufacturer on the planet. They sell weapons to both sides. Everybody's feeding at the trough, and it's 100% engineered. I'm not saying there isn't the random nutcase down in Colombia somewhere building a cocaine empire that murders people left and right. Those things happen, and I don't want that around me, and I want to hopefully be protected from it. But other than those random, unusual experience, it's all engineered. And it's like you say, in Russia, people just want a dacha. They want their house, and they want a little dacha out in the woods, which is like a little cabin to go to on weekends and decompress. Everybody wants the same thing.
Yeah.
They want to stop. They want to stop us from moving to the free energy, because right now there are magnet generators, and I've written on this. You can go to georgemcclure.net and click on Journal of the Collapse and letters, and you can read about these things. But there are magnet generators right now. Now, magnets last an average of 90 to 100 years. It takes a little energy to make a magnet. But then you put the magnets together, and we all remember when we were kids in third grade or whenever it was, they had these ring magnets and these bar magnets, and if you push the positive ends together, they repel each other and they move apart. And you arrange the magnets in these magnet generators such that they constantly repel each other, and they spin. And then it turns a wheel, and it's energy. And one of these boxes is about the size of a box you could fit a basketball into. It's a cube, maybe 16 inches on a side or 18 inches cubical. And one of these magnet generators will run for 90 to 100 years, and it'll power your whole house, everything in it, just the way you run your house now, and your electric car. So you come home at night and you plug your electric car in. It runs everything for your life, and those are available right now for $30,000. But they don't want you to know about that. Yeah. Rockefeller doesn't want you to know. The man's name is Rockefeller because he owns all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So that's what it's all about.
You're right. And, back in 2011, a former colleague of mine and myself, we had a guy on the show, and my colleague went out to see his car to check it out himself, and this car was running on freaking water. It was running on water. He drove in it. I mean, this thing, it was real. Yeah. And all of a sudden, the guy had disappeared, and I did get contacted from the team who apparently took it over at one point, and they were going to come on the show, and I never heard from him again. So I don't know what's going on there, but there are so many. There's also a story that was told to me by these same people about how Ford had a truck that you could fill it up and you could drive from one end of the country to the other end of the country and still have gas in that truck, and that is locked up in a garage somewhere and they're not allowed to release it. So these things, this is real. I mean, we could be doing a lot better if we wanted to, but
the thing is that now there are so many people all over the planet that are figuring this out, that there are internal combustion motors that can run on slurry of water slurry, and it's happening all over the whole planet that people are figuring this out. And they're not going to be able to, they can't suppress it because there are too many of us. It's going to get down to they either have to kill us all or they're going to let it happen. And that's why Brzezinski announced, it's been 4 or 5 years now, at one of their big conferences. It wasn't a Bilderberg, but it was similar to that, a big conference. Guys like Brzezinski and Kissinger go to them. And he announced, this was 4 or 5 years ago, that they have lost and they're going to have to retreat, and they're going to go underground, so to speak. They're also literally going underground, but they're going to hide, and they're going to come back and try to take over humanity again in the future. But that's what Brzezinski said, because they've realized that they've lost this battle because humanity's waking up. But it's going to get really, really ugly and brutal until it turns over.
And it is getting ugly, and it is getting brutal, and they've got a lot of weapons at their disposal, including the mainstream media that is used to spew the disinformation. And of course, they've infiltrated even alternative medias. And what I tell people, this is my message to everybody: question every darn thing, no matter what. Look for yourself. Get your, use a guy like myself or George here, and use us as like maybe a guidance. Okay, let's go check out what they're talking about, but check it out. Don't take our word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Do your own research, and that's very important. And George, we're down to about the last 5-6 minutes here. And what I want to do is give you the floor to get out anything that you like. And I tell you, I've really enjoyed speaking with you tonight, and I thank you for coming on.
It's a pleasure. It's really good, and I appreciate it. And thanks to our many fans and listeners tuning in. And you're doing a great thing, man. And, I'm going to make a little point. And I know this, of course, I was SCI, SBSI, above top secret, federal compartmentalized. And there's one, and I'm afraid it's probably true of a lot of them, but there's one big independent news network that's 100% run by the military. It's 100% advocated. And the reason I haven't exposed it is because I think it's going to bring the hounds of Hades down upon me. But you have to be really, really careful, even with independent media. And that brings me to what I was saying about your show, Mike, is you're wide open. I don't see a bit of that happening, and I just hope you'll be able to continue with it. But we could do a little bit more on the Tzolkin calendar, because we talked about some of the weaknesses and the nonsense in the Gregorian calendar and why it's there. Why it's to keep us down. But then the Tzolkin calendar, mechanically, it works on 2 cycles running at the same time. One is a cycle of 1 through 13, and they're numbered 1 through 13. And then there's another cycle running concurrently with it that's a cycle of 1 to 20. And remember, I said that Mayan used the base 20 number system, vigesimal. And so this other cycle of days, they're called day glyphs or day names, run 1 through 20. And these 2 things together, the number and the day glyph, together describe the energies for that particular day. And for instance, the number 1 signifies unity. The number 8, the 8th day, signifies solidarity. And the 13th day would signify ascension, because you're at the end of the cycle, you're ready to leap off and start a brand new cycle. And the day names, I'm not going to go through them all, but one is called Emish, or alligator. I call it crocagator, crocodile, alligator, crocagator. And that signifies primeval earth force. Another one is Manik, which is my day. Stands for deer and hand, peaceful and helper or healer. So in the Mayan system, we're all born on a particular day, just like in the Western civilization system. You're born on what's your birthday? Well, you know that. It's all memorized. Well,
Yeah.
in the Mayan system, I was born on 13 Deer. That was the day I was born on. So 13 is the ascension of the cycle. Deer is the healer or helper, and the peace symbol of peace and peacefulness.
Mm-hmm.
And in Maya, the day you were born becomes your name. So in the Mayan civilization, everybody has one of 260 days, because these 13 days against the 20-day cycle takes 260 days to complete. That's the length of the completion of the Tzolkin calendar. So everybody in the Mayan and Aztec and cities and countries had one of 260 names. Well, and they had another name, the surname too, but they had, like my name would be 13 Deer. That is my name in Mayan, 13 Deer. And they believe that you actually choose the day you come into this existence. You're born into this world. They said, well, you're born in on the day you want to be born in. The Hopi, many American Indians believe the same thing. You choose the day you come into this existence from somewhere else, because we're souls. We were somewhere else first. We're in this earthly. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being, and I'm going back from whence I came. When this part of my journey is done, I'm going back. I'm continuing. I've already seen the tunnel. I started going down it a few times. I already know what's going to happen. So
yeah.
So in the Mayan system, the days signify spiritual energy and energy that may be coming in from the universe. That's all I was saying on that topic.
All right. Well, George, I thank you so much for sharing all this with us tonight, and we've got to have you back soon. Not put so much space in between it. I appreciate you being here, and thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you. It's a pleasure, and I enjoyed it. And we'll say good night to everybody.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, what's the website again? One more time for everybody.
GeorgeMcClure.net is the clearinghouse. It has links to my music, to all the articles I've written and posted online, letters to the governor of Tennessee and to the mayor, letters burning people's butts when they're stupid. And if you like that kind of thing, it can be entertaining. And for all my music things, go to officialgeorgemcclure.com or go to iTunes. I have 2 albums and DVDs on iTunes, and you can hear my music just about anywhere. Go to YouTube for free music and all kinds of goodies. We just posted a brand new video 2 days ago, and you can go check it out on YouTube. Just Google my name, and it'll come up.
All right, great. Well, again, thank you, George. Keep up the great work, and keep your positive attitude. I love it.
Thank you, man. Love you all.
All right, back at you, my friend. Good night. All right, everybody. George McClure.
Yeah.
Hey, George. Welcome to Late Night in the Midlands, my friend. We are live. How are you?
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm wonderful. How are you, Mike?
I am doing fine. I'm sorry if I caught you by surprise there for a minute. I know the number doesn't always come up normal, so but welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you back. It's been a while. Love the song too, by the way. I think I told you this last time. I use it often as a bumper music. I love it.
Oh, cool. The Alien Love Song.
Yes. Yeah, very good. It's got that old style to it, and I like it.
Yeah.
So,
sweet.
Yeah, so I guess let's start out there. What gave you the idea?
What gave me the idea? First, I'm going to say hello to our new listeners. Howdy. I know there's some new people listening in live, and others new will be coming up. And I'm glad you started with the music, because most people know me from music, or at least some of the new people are. And what got me on Alien Love? I made love to an alien last night. I was beginning to tour. This was around '94. I was actually touring about half-time at that point out of Nashville with my show, which back then I called it McClure's America. And but I had a part-time job, Mike. I had a part-time job. Believe it or not, I was a security guard. I was a security officer, and I liked that kind of job because nobody tells you what to think, and all you have to do is wear a uniform. I could bring my guitar banjo in, and you walk around every hour or something like that, and then your time's your own.
Yeah.
And so I did exactly that. I brought my banjo in, and I'd sit and pick on it or whatever. And they have to have a television in this place, and there was a 1-hour pseudo-documentary on alien abductions in the United States. And it said in the course of that, Mike, it said that 1 out of 4 Americans has either been molested by space aliens or abducted by space aliens. Huh. And I thought that was the funniest thing I ever heard. And so I wrote Alien Love right then. I actually wrote it on the banjo.
Yeah.
But so I wrote it right then, and before I went home that night, it was done. The song was finished. So that's how it came about.
So then every time I play that song, I probably have no idea how many people it means even more to.
Oh, who knows what it means. I had the only minor kind of hit I had was with that song, as a matter of fact, when the internet revolution, the digital revolution started with MP3. There's a company over in Japan that wanted my song. They wanted Alien Love. And they agreed to pay me so many, what percentage per download. And that was when MP3 was just brand new. And it ended up, I never got a penny out of these guys. It was Big Fish Japan, but I never got a penny out of them. But they emailed me. I had to email them like 8 times to get an answer. And then they emailed me back and they said, 10,000 people, 10,000 Japanese have downloaded your song. You're a big, hugest city and civilization on Earth, most advanced one on Earth. So they had floating gardens, huge libraries, which Cortez burned, and so on.
Right.
So there was the long count is the next calendar we'll talk about. The long count in Mayans, it just started and went day by day forever. That's the long count, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 10 million and keep going.
Whew.
That's the long count.
That is long.
And then there's the Tzolkin calendar, the Tzolkin, the Tzolkin calendar. And this is the daily spiritual calendar that all Mayan people and Aztecan people and so on used. And by the way, there's still 6 million people in the Yucatan and Mexico who speak Mayan every day. That's their language, 6 million people. So this is a living culture.
So when they say that, when they say, George, we don't know what happened to the Mayan people, then basically they're ignoring the fact that the Mayan people are still here.
Yes, it's just one more lie perpetrated by Western science and Western civilization. There's just so many of them, and I'm glad that's exactly it. You hit the nail on the head. If you read accounts or listen to accounts of Cortez coming into Mexico, into the Aztec civilization, they say the Spaniards encountered the Aztec people pulling living hearts out of virgins and sacrificing virgins and all this stuff. 100% lies. It's 100% untrue. The real truth is that they came in to the Americas. There were 110 million American Indians, Native Americans living in North and Central and South America. 110 million. And 70 million, it's estimated, were killed by syphilis and smallpox, by European diseases against which they had no protection. They had no resistance. But then the other 40 million people, they...
Uh-oh. They may have clipped them. Let's see here. Yeah, I think so. Hold on, what am I seeing here? I'm seeing... No. Almost looks like... Oh, okay. Yeah, alright, yeah. How was... Skype asked how the call was. Well, I don't think they really want to know. It was going really well, as a matter of fact. But, yeah, we lost them, so let's bring them back on, because we're not going to cut to a break yet. So let's go ahead and get George back on with us. And let him pick right back up where he left off. All right, we'll get him. He might have been moving around, hit a dead zone maybe. George?
What happened?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, what happened?
I'm not sure. I thought maybe you moved and hit a dead zone or something, but you sound good tonight.
How far did it go through? I don't think I hit a dead zone. I rarely get them. It's possible.
Okay.
How far did I get before it cut out?
Well, you were talking about you had told us about the long count
hit in Japan, and of course, 10,000 downloads is nothing now for a big hit online. It'd be like 1 million downloads in a day, but that was at the dawn of MP3 and internet, and 10,000 was a big figure, and so I had the satisfaction, the querulous satisfaction of having a minor hit somewhere, but of course no money came through with it, but it was but yeah, so who knows what it means to people. Japanese, they were downloading it, they were hitting it. So
well, maybe they made love to a lot of aliens, so you never know.
Yeah. Exactly. So in the last verse of that song, they had a child, and she went back to the stars. His alien partner went back to the stars and left him on Earth raising this half-breed alien named Allie, for alien, No. So that was the last verse of the song.
That's fantastic, and in a time when people are talking a lot about star children, and I'm hearing a lot about these black-eyed children too, but not hearing enough that I know enough about them. But, just the thought of that is maybe there are some, lovings going on with aliens, and, this whole hybrid thing might actually have some meaning to it.
Oh, yeah, and, of course, the genetic, a lot of people, and this is some of the spiritual things, the Mayan calendar, Tzolkin calendar things that I could talk about tonight. It's there are all these energies hitting Earth now. The Earth is, astronomically speaking, physically speaking, Earth in our solar system is in a unique position that it only enters every several thousand years. And where the energy from the center of the Milky Way galaxy actually is striking the sun and therefore, coming on into the planets. And there are people who say that these energies striking us now are actually changing our DNA, because DNA is photoreactive. It reacts to sunlight. And I haven't researched this in detail, but I've read some, what I think are pretty sound sources who have said, who are saying that the energy coming in the sunlight now may actually be changing our DNA, and it's very possible. Because most people say about this ascension of consciousness thing, about this development of mankind, humanity, most people say that it's a vibrational thing while we're in a new vibrational consciousness now, the age of Aquarius. And that was that song, I'm old enough, I'm of the generation to remember the song, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
Age of Aquarius. I changed the key. But the age of Aquarius was a huge hit. It went on for months and months. It seemed like for a year or 2 years it was a hit. And we're actually in the age of Aquarius now. And the Mayan people would say we're in the ninth wave of consciousness now, or the ninth world. The Hopi might say that we're in the fifth world. We have entered the fifth world now. It's a vibrational thing, wavelength type thing. Mm-hmm. And then we get into those conversations like those people who are trapped in a three-dimensional framework of reality, or 4D framework of reality, are not going to be able to vibrate with the new energy that's hitting us now, the new vibrations and the new waves. They won't be able to work with it, and so they're being left behind. So there are a lot of these kind of things going on, and it sort of is like the Alien Love song, which 1994 is when I wrote it. It was sort of 20 years ahead of its time, in a way, which is not unusual. In my career in music, I found that I tend to be way ahead of the curve, you know. And a lot of other people in Nashville have been watching my music career intently, including major labels, watched me closely, and they wanted to always know. Mike, when I started flying out, this was about 2006, I started flying to Arizona. First I drove a lot. I got tired of driving, so I started flying into Phoenix and then go on down, and I crossed the border into Mexico. I was doing this 2-3 times a year, just a total escape, total vacation for a week or so, and then come back. And these people were watching me so intently, major label people, that they'd send people down to the airport to try to pick my brain about where I'm going, because they thought I was going on business trips. You know, they thought I was cooking some new music business deal in Arizona. They wanted in on it. They wanted to find out what I was doing and then scoop me, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing, that a phenomenon of my life. But yeah, so.
Yeah, that's I love the song. I think that you know, and again, I joke around, but I think that for some it might have meaning. I've had people guests on this show who have told me they've been. One woman said that she was impregnated and then the baby was removed at some point, and so you know, there's a lot that goes on off the earth, I guess. So you talk about living in harmony, and how the I guess what you're saying here is that the Mayan calendar, actually that's what it was talking about, right? Not the end of the world, but rather a new breed of consciousness.
Exactly. The Mayan calendars, now there were more than one, and the Hob calendar, H-A-A-B, Hob calendar, was like our calendar, or Western civilization's calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar. And the Hob calendar measured one thing and one thing only, the revolution of the Earth around the sun, 365 and a quarter days. And that's like the Gregorian calendar. It only measures one thing, going around the sun. And we're going to come back to this in a second and see that it does a horribly poor job of doing that. And we'll talk about why. But then another calendar in the Mayan had, and by the way, the Maya people grew into the Aztec. The Toltec and Olmec preceded them. So it's a civilization that ran 4,000 to 6,000 years in Mesoamerica and Middle America. And when Cortez came across that, so of course he marched into what's now Mexico City. In Mexico, he was absolutely dumbfounded. He came in with 20 horses and 200 men and a bunch of Catholic priests. And what they found was floating gardens, 1 million people, city of 1 million population. It was the...
And then you started getting into, I guess they say that the people are no longer here, but they are. And at that point, it clicked out. So,
okay, you had asked me a question. Well, anyway, so we'll pick it up there.
Okay.
So the long count, and then the Tzolkin, Tzolkin, the Tzolkin calendar is the daily spiritual calendar describing the energies of the day, the energies that come in and hit Mother Earth from other places. And these energies all have a fundamental effect on we humans and everything living on Earth. So the Tzolkin calendar is the one that most people talk about when they're talking about the Mayan calendar. And it's a calendar that has a cycle of 260 days. It doesn't have a cycle of going around like the Earth around the sun, 365 days. Mm-hmm. It has a cycle of 260 days. And 260 days just happens to be the length of time it takes Venus to revolve around the sun. And it just happens to be the length of time of a woman's gestation. So human beings, the woman's in gestation for 260 days. So this 260 is a kind of a magic number.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're fine. That is a magic number. So, real quickly, just so people can understand, now you actually you are a scientist. So right?
I'm a highly trained scientist. Right. I'm a highly trained musician and writer, and I'm also a showman. I'm a performer.
Great, because I want to ask you a little bit about Pluto later, too. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the pictures. I just wanted to make sure. But, yeah, so yeah, okay, so the cycles, they have some similarities.
Yes, it has the Tzolkin 260-day cycle has similarities with other events. So the calendar is recording much more than the Earth's trip around the sun. So let's talk just a little bit about the Gregorian calendar, the one that Western civilization uses, Western science, Western civilization uses the Gregorian calendar from Pope Gregory. What it marks is only the one thing, the Earth's revolution around the sun. But there's something we need to point out right away, sort of smack you in the face kind of thing. It has 12 months. And a month, like a menses, a month is tied to the lunar cycle, to the moon. Mm-hmm. The lunar cycle is 28 days. And if you divide 365 by 28, what a real month is a lunar moon cycle. There are 13 of them. So if you multiply 13 times 28 days in the lunar cycle, it comes out to exactly 364 days. It's the length of our year plus 1 day. So if we were really running a calendar that marked months, we'd be using 13 months plus 1 extra day. But the Gregorian calendar uses 12 months of 30 or 31 days each, and then they do the homogrification